Kia ora everyone. We'll just wait for a few more minutes just to see if a few more people will join us, and then we'll get started with the webinar. All right, we might get underway gradually, and people will continue to join us, I'm sure. So kia ora koutou, my name's Bella Whittle. I'm the Manager Systems Reporting here at the Water Services Authority, Taumata Arowai, and I'm joined by Molly Carruthers, who's a Data and Insights Analyst, and also Ed Yong. So they will be helping run through some of the changes to the guidance and the template this year and assisting you with any questions you might have about your reporting. But before we get into the session proper, I might just kick us off with a karakia. Thanks, Ed. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pōna mo te moana. He huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai. Tātou I a tātou katoa. Haumie, huie, taikie. Thank you. So again, just to give you an overview, we're here to talk about the reporting for the 2023-2024 calendar year. So actually, that looks like it's incorrect. It should be the 2024 to 2025 calendar year. No, apologies. I think I'm tripping myself up here, but we have just reported the Network Environmental Performance Report for 2023-24, and this is for the next reporting round. We've already had one webinar. This is the second webinar, and today, as I mentioned, Molly will be running you through the updated template and guidance. So just regarding questions, we would prefer if you put those directly in our Q&A function. We've disabled the chat for this session, and we'll, unless there's anything really burning, we'll try and address all of those things at the end. Thanks, and I will hand over to Molly now.
Kia ora, thank you, Bella. So starting off, just a reminder of how and when to submit your report. So the due date for this year is the 30th of September, and no late submissions this year, please. And everything else is the same as last year. So the template goes to the measures inbox, and you will receive an email letting you know if the submission was successful or if the submission didn't quite work, and that email will give you the reason why. And if you're still having issues, do contact that measures inbox and we'll be able to help you submit that successfully. So the guidance changes for this year, mainly there's the changes to the measures, the update of some of the measure ID, measure numbers, and obviously the addition of 41 new wastewater measures. So the general changes, changing the numbering to ensure there's a consistent match between the guidance and the template. A big thing that we've done this year is to remove a lot of the comments sections and replaced where those comment sections were with either a drop-down box for reason not available for information, or we have got some measure fields where we do feel that a free text comment field is appropriate. We've also added, obviously, the reason not available, and a big change that we've made this year is the granularity of the data confidence entry. So that is now kind of at the group level instead of at the individual measure level. So specifically, I'm sorry we have to go through all of these, but we have DA5, WA2, which are the length of pipe for drinking water and wastewater. They've been changed from the network level to the organisation level. It just, with that decrease in granularity, helps with our, helps with our reporting. We've also got a change in the methodology for calculating the asset condition. So that's for wastewater and drinking water. It's now a drop-down selection instead of a free text field. So there's a list of options that we ask for you to give us how you got to a asset condition or a method to assess the asset condition. We've also got a change in the difference between connections and units, and we'll go into that a little bit further at the end of this. And we now want to know also the volume of exceedance where a wastewater, the abstraction volume, the amount that was exceeded under the consent. EH20, the disposal route, so we've split that into 3 separate measures now to make it a bit more specific. We also have more drop-downs similar, so for the asset condition and the assessment methodology, we now require the unavoidable annual real loss to be reported on, so that's DRE2. DRE14, we've changed the units from gigajoules to kilowatts a year, and we've also simplified the OPEX and CAPEX measures to just be the entire dollar amount, so not up to any kind of thousands or anything like that. And we've also asked for the amount of gravity wastewater pipes in the network under wastewater network WA 2.1. For wastewater again, we've got the average nominal flows for the wastewater treatment plant. That's been an added measure. We also have added the average peak flow for the wastewater treatment plant under wastewater networks. We would like to ask for the design standard for wastewater networks, so that's another one of those new drop downs instead of a free text field. And we've also requested the percentage additional capacity for the wastewater network. And finally, we would like to know the methodology used to determine the criticality, and that's another one of those removal of the free text field into a specific drop-down. Oh, I can turn. Oh, that's better. So a template, quick template tour, just looking at those changes and what they look like in the template itself. So you'll be able to see that that confidence there is now collected at the group level. The reason not available field is next to every single measure. Those new wastewater measures, the 41, they're all highlighted in bright yellow to make that quite obvious. They're across wastewater network and wastewater organisation. And we've also added a couple of like UX things, so you can go into the measure lists and you can click back and forth between the measure definition and the actual cell entry in the spreadsheet. So we hope that that's going to be helpful as well. Same format for the sheets as last year. So the drinking water organisation, network, consent, abstraction, wastewater organisation, network, and consent. But this year we have added a new sheet for feedback, so we would really appreciate if you could just take 5 minutes to answer. I think there's 3 questions in there and some space for any other comments or feedback that you have for us, and also that measures inbox is open anytime for feedback as well, not just at the submission date. So again, we're very feedback focused this year, so we have the measures inbox. We welcome any connection or feedback or anything you think would help us improve this process. We'd really like to hear about it. And here is the link to our common resources. So the measures and guidance, our webpage, and our measures inbox. And these slides will be sent out to you at the end of this webinar as well. So I'm going to hand over to Ed Yong, our Senior Technical Advisor, Asset Management. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Molly. So if we could have the next slide. We're going to go through some frequently asked questions. But first, we're going to do a fun little game. So I know people have been having comments about how we've changed the measures around connections. So this year with connections, we want physical connections, but we also added another measure so that you can record the number of property units. The difference is physical connection is going to be whatever is connected to the public network, whereas the units is all the various properties that are connected to the network via either private or public. So this is a fun little example that we drew up so that people can understand what the difference is between the two. So the first one is going to be retirement village of 100 dwellings on private network with one connection to the municipal network. If you can guess what the number of connection is, it's going to be, next, Molly, one connection and 100 units, because there's 100 units in the retirement village, but there's only one connection to the municipal. Now, if, say, each dwelling has a meter, Molly, nothing changes. Basically, the meter doesn't really mean anything when we're talking about property units or connections. It's just a measuring tool. We actually want to know, say, like, if there's one connection, there's one connection. That's the physical connection. But if there's 100 units, there's 100 units. It doesn't matter if they're metered or not. So you're going to have to estimate whether they're measured or metered or unmetered to include it into the count. So next one, this has a little to do with the private side. So 5 properties down a right of way with private network and all properties are metered. If we look at that one, we still have one connection, but now there's still 5 and there are 5 units. If we go to the next one with 5 properties down a right of way and each connection to a municipal network, you have 5 connections and 5 units. So there's the difference there. Because the 5 properties had one connection into the municipal and then split amongst all of them, that only has one connection. But now you have 5 different connections to the municipal network, so you have 5 different connections. Now we're going to talk about non-residential connections. 10 shops with separate titles with one connection. All shops have water meters. So in this case, we have 1 non-residential connection and 10 non-residential units. So now we go to if a mall had 100 shops supplied by 2 connections to a private network on the premises, this would equal to 2 non-residential connections, because there's 2 supplies going to it, and 100 non-residential units. Now we have 1 apartment building with 3 apartments, each with a separate connection to a municipal network. It is 3 and 3, because each apartment has its own connection. If that happens in real life, who knows? But it could be a possibility. Usually most apartments have 1 connection, so it'll be dependent on, again, how many physical connections there are to network. And now here's a fun one. It's a mixed-use building. So you have a building with a shop on the bottom floor and an apartment on the top floor and only 1 connection to the municipal network. If we do this, it'll be 1 non-residential connection, 1 residential unit, and 1 non-residential unit. We do this because the shop is probably going to use more water than the residential unit. When you're looking at cases where there's going to be like a mixed use building, it's best to use whatever is going to consume the most water and count it towards that connection. Because if the volume from, say, a non-residential is going to be very minimum compared to the amount of water that's going to be used at the other way around. If the non-residential is going to use a massive amount of water and then the residential is going to use a small amount, it's better to count it towards the non-residential because it's just so minuscule. Okay, so hopefully that explains some things. Now we'll go over some FAQs. Again, this one is just talking about if you just commissioned a piece of equipment or a plant during midway through the year, we don't want you to report on that. We only want to see the snapshot at the end of the year of all the equipment that is in operation. And then again, with low data confidence ratings, we're going to understand again that there could be low data confidence with your ratings. And I know some people are having questions about combining the data confidence for each measure now. It is literally just an average of all of what you think, what the auditability of the data is. So if one set of data is more auditable, or you think it's like at a 5, and then you have some other data that's less auditable, so you think it's at a 1, you're going to try to average them together. It'll be maybe a weighted average. That'll be the best way to try to figure it out due to the amount of data that's on everything, but it is going to be an average for the combined group of measures. Next slide. What if we don't have a data point or it's not applicable? We do have a drop-down cell that says that's for reason not available anymore. So you just have to select not available or measure not applicable. That's the easiest way now, because we really don't want you to leave blanks or just kind of not answer or put a 0 in when it's not a 0. If it's not applicable, just leave it blank and then select that it's not applicable or data not available. Now, we don't want everyone to answer this way, because even if you don't think the data is correct or not as accurate as you would like to do, put it in anyway and just put it at a lower confidence, because we want to make sure that we still get data. And even if it's historic data, like especially with the condition assessments, and we want you to put your most recent data in there. So yeah, just answer it appropriately. And if you really, really don't have the data, then put in the not available. What if the meter is not directly adjacent to the deduction point? Again, that is for measuring flow rates. If there's no other connections inside of that line and it's a direct connection from whatever the intake is to the flow meter, it's fine. What is overflow reporting referring to? So overflow reporting is referring to the wastewater. We want basically how you figure out there's an overflow when you're operating the network. It's not really reporting to the regional council, it's reporting to yourselves. Like, how do you notify yourself that there's an overflow? So that's like SCADA, or is it verbal, like someone going out and having to physically look at it? Or if there's a model that has a certain rainfall that triggers it to the alarm saying this could be an overflow here. Those are the things that we're asking for. That's how we want to know if you're getting a reporting of the overflow. It's not a reporting to regional council. How should we count the number of connections when there's one physical connection? Well, we already went through that, so we can go past that one. What if we have not completed condition assessment during the reporting period? So like I said before, we want the most recent condition assessment results. We don't need you to perform a condition assessment every year. That is very onerous. We want everything as most recent in the data as possible, so that we can get an idea of how the network is, what the network conditions are. So if you had a desktop assessment from last year or the year before, and you did an assessment for a part of your network from this year, you can just combine them into one assessment and submit the results to us. What if we have a bore source? Do we still need to respond to the measure above fish patches? So this year, we did put down that drop down saying measure not applicable. So if you have a bore, you do not need to answer the fish passage question. Just put the measure not applicable. It will save us a lot of time, because we did have a lot of people answer. We did have a fish passage assessment when you were in a bore, and it was just saying, no, we have a bore. Please don't do that. We really just want a simple answer by saying not applicable. It'll make it a lot easier. Okay, so we have a couple questions. Stephen asks, Tauranga City Council has 2 wastewater treatment plants, and last year they reported as separate. They're in the template this year as 2 separate networks. However, they're interconnected. Consequently, it is acceptable. Is it acceptable to report the plant specific measures separately in the wastewater network sheet while reporting the network length and connection measures for the entire network under the Timong wastewater network only? Yes. We want to know what all your wastewater treatment plants are doing. If both your treatment plants are discharging into the environment, either land or water, we want to know about it. So if your network, put the network under one of them, and then there's a comment section at the bottom of the pages. Just make a comment there stating that there's 2 plants they're both interconnected networks. So we're putting this in one of them and not the other one. That way we can figure it out when we ingest the data, why all of the other side is blank.
The wastewater networks are also reflective of what's registered in Hinikorako, so they were registered at some point as two distinct networks, and are published on the wastewater register as such.
Next question is from Linley. Is it possible to have clarification on what is expected from the new measure W-A 9.2 as an average peak flow for wastewater from a wastewater treatment plant? So when we had it before, we had the ratio of peak flow to nominal flow. We're asking for that actual volume or flow rate that you use to calculate that peak flow when you did it, that ratio. So that is what we're trying to look at. And generally, when you're looking at an average of the peak flows, you want to just take all the different peak flows that you had over the year and kind of do either a median or a mean. Actually, a mean would probably be better. But yeah, we want the average of that over the year so that we can figure out how much your flow rates are spiking or above the nominal flow. This last year with the ratio, it didn't give a lot of information. And this year, actually having the actual flow rates, it gives us a little bit more information. Also associated with that measure is what caused the peak flow. So that way we can understand if it's going to be infiltration or maintenance issues or heavy rainfall. Just that kind of information is really important to us to understand what's causing overflows and high flows into treatment plants. Next question. Is the drop-down section for W-EH9 supposed to have options similar to the old Water New Zealand template? Permanent activity under a regional plan, treated as emergency discharge, resource consent held for wet weather discharge, no regulatory approach. As currently in the template, it has options, no data available, measure not applicable, limited reasons, information non. Molly?
We'll look into that. I'll just have a look now.
As Molly looks through that, I will go to the next question. What is the definition of a wastewater treatment plant, and can wastewater be discharged into another plant with a higher level of treatment? So we want a wastewater treatment plant. So if you're discharging to an environment through that treatment plant, that is the treatment plant that we want the data for. If you're treating the waste and then further treating it, that's like an intermediary treatment plant. We don't want the information from that. Because it's part of the network, we only want the end point where it's discharging into the environment. So that is the treatment plants that we want. Next one, network is designed to factor of 6 times DWF in accordance with the local LDM, similar to NZA. Can you give guidance as to how to determine AEP? There is a calculation inside of the guidance that tells you how to calculate the AEP. If that's not good enough, then send us the email. We'll try to give you some more information about that. If you're having problems, because we do have a stormwater person on our side, so they were doing a lot of the AEP stuff. Any further questions?
Just on the wastewater overflow regulation approach, we left that as a free text comment field this year. So that was one of those ones that we decided we were not quite ready to put as a select drop down. So it is a free text comment field in there next to the selection, which is where you don't have the data available or measure not applicable, but we would like you to comment in the free text box this year, and we might use that information to develop a drop down for the year after.
There you go, Stephen. We're here to help. So if there's any other questions, I know We did receive a question via email a little while ago about questions about overflows and what we quantify as an overflow, especially for rainfall. We're really trying to get away from naming things as wet weather and dry weather overflows now. So we're not going to mention about rainfall levels in order to quantify an overflow. It's just if you have a discharge from your system, um, that is an overflow, then it has to be counted. So in the original, let me read the question for you if I can find it right now. Bear with me. So the question was, for data points WEH10 and WEH11, do you have any guidance to assessing stormwater infiltration? Our understanding is that some councils around the country are using the DIA guidance from 2014 as attached for dry weather overflows as follows. This metric only applies to days when less than 1 millimeter of rain has fallen during continuous 24-hour operations. Have we got a position on this? So those two measures are around overflows caused by blockages and then overflows caused by plant failure. In our guidance, basically, well, what we're basically specifying is if you have a failure, no matter what the rainfall is, if it's causing the discharge, then that's an overflow due to failure. If you have a blockage, even if it's high rainflow or not, if it's overflowing because of that blockage, then it's a discharge due to blockage. So we're really going to be quite prescriptive about this because we don't want to focus on rainfall being the effect, and we don't know if there's enough rainfall to actually cause a discharge due to high flow for that reason, because it would have to exceed the capacity. So we're really just saying if it's a blockage, then call it a blockage. If it's a plant malfunction, equipment malfunction, then call it equipment malfunction for the overflows. There's not going to be a rain limit on it. Do we have any other questions?
There's a few in the FAQ, Ed, that are probably more you.
Hmm?
There's a few in the FAQ that are probably more for you.
Yep, there's one from Meta
There it
Tripathi.
is.
Yep, and Chris Thurston.
Can we provide liters per day per connection instead of liters per day per unit? Oh, it didn't refresh for me. Sorry. So what we're trying to do is separate the two connections because units because we really want to have like median use per household, which was what the old connections thing was. And this year, the units is basically a proxy for what the old connection calculation was. And we want to have the new connections be really physical connections to the network. So it does drastically reduce the number of connections. So that's why we separated out. Oh, we changed the measure to units instead of connections. If Mira, if you can email us about what your concern is, that would be a little bit better, like how you're calculating connections right now, so that we can figure out what would be best for you to respond with. And then Chris, GHG emissions from wastewaters are included in reporting this year, though not for the treatment plant. Can you clarify whether this may be looked at in 2026 and whether this data should still be measured, recorded as plants? So there was an issue with the guidance. Unfortunately, when it went from consultation to release, that measure got dropped. So we are looking to introduce the treatment plant emissions for greenhouse gases at a later date. I'm not too sure when, but it will be released as a part of it again so that we can measure greenhouse gas emissions from wastewater treatment plants. So sorry about that. I know some of you have collected the data, but there's no measure for it right now. So it's
If I can also add to that, Ed, it might be a matter of watch this space, Chris, because there might be other purposes, for example, policy purposes that we might be looking at that information for. So if that's the case, we will be putting out some further comms around that, but we're not collecting it through the template this year.
Any other questions? How does the new differentiation between connections and units affect leakage calculations? Should we be using number of units instead of number of connections for calculating parameters such as UARL? Yes, we want to ensure that we have actual physical connections, because what we're trying to look at is the network leakage rather than leakage on private properties. So this will hopefully give you a better idea of what the leakage on the network that is managed by network operators is giving us, as opposed to having all the units of the properties that are on private networks included as well. So we're trying to get away and really separate out the two. So everybody, if you're doing Carl and UARL, we are going to ask for you to use the new connections instead of using the units. Another big thing that we really wanted to do was to be able to calculate Carl properly, because at smaller connection densities, it is harder to compare them, because one, you will have to compare with liters per kilometer of pipe per day, and then for higher densities, liters per connection per day. So that's why we also asked for the network level pipe length and network level connections. So that way we can actually do a proper assessment of the water loss and Carl so that we can see and compare them properly. And that's why we ended up changing some of the reference levels for the measures from organization to network. So we have another 30 minutes. If you have any more questions, this is a perfect opportunity. We do have another session in September, but I'm going to try to get everybody responding as soon as possible, so it's not a mad rush at the end. Okay. Well, I don't think there's any more questions. Again, if you do have any, please feel free to email the measures inbox at measures@taumataarowai.govt.nz. We'll be able to respond to whatever questions that you have. And if you need further clarifications, or if you are experiencing issues with your submission this year because of some of the changes, please feel free to email us. We can make accommodations. We can have a discussion about how to deal with the certain situation. And we know that there was a lot of changes this year, so they're not difficult, but it will be a little bit more complex for trying to do the submission. But so that's why we're here to help you. And if you need any assistance, just email us and we can work around. Now I'll hand back to Bella with the closing karakia. Oh wait,
I think there's
one
one
thing popped
last
up.
question. Can you see that?
Yeah. Our abstraction consent only states max daily water take. Is it fine to leave 7-day and annual blank? Yes. Only answer what you have. Do not answer anything else, because you don't need to. Like, we're trying to make it really simple this year so that if you don't have it, don't answer it. You don't need to calculate it. You don't need to do funky things to the numbers. We gave you all the options to try to answer for whatever resource consent you have. Okay.
Okay, great. Lucky last opportunity. Any last questions, or we will close out? No further questions. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama, te nāko, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takatu. Koi ara e rongo whakairia aki ki runga, kia tina, hui e taikie. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and all the best with your reporting.
Thank you.